A wife found her husband asleep beside the lover from the memorial photo. What horrifying secret was buried? A white curtain of rain was falling the moment Claire stepped out of the Chicago airport terminal. The downpour wasn't heavy, but the drops were cold and biting, like a bad omen she could feel in the depths of her soul. She should have stayed one more night to finalize the signing of a $1 million contract, but a sudden, sharp premonition that morning had compelled her to cut the trip short. She just wanted to be home with her husband, Michael, their little daughter, Lily, and the familiar peace she craved after days away. The taxi pulled up to their 3-story villa in the suburbs, where the lights glowed with their usual warmth. Yet, something made Claire's heart feel heavy. She didn't know when it started, but the nights away from home had made her feel like a stranger in her own house. Something had changed, nothing clear, nothing concrete, but it was there, an insistent thorn in her chest. Claire took out her key and quietly opened the door, planning to surprise Michael with an embrace from behind, just like when they first fell in love. But as she walked past the living room, she froze. The house was far too quiet. The light in the upstairs bedroom was on, the door slightly ajar, and there were faint sounds, so faint, like ragged breaths mixed with the patter of the rain outside. She crept up the stairs, her steps as light as a whisper, her heart hammering uncontrollably. Her hand trembled as she pushed open the wooden door. It swung inward, and her entire world shattered in a single horrifying moment. On their large bed, Michael was holding a strange woman. They were both naked, lost in a deep sleep. Michael was oblivious, but Claire was paralyzed. The other woman suddenly turned her head, and in that instant, Claire felt the blood in her veins turn to ice. That face was not unfamiliar. It was Evelyn, the patient who had died on Michael's operating table 2 years ago. The woman who had sent Michael into a deep depression, the woman he had cried over nightly, and the woman he swore he had never loved. So why was she here, alive and well, lying next to Claire's husband, with a face completely unchanged after 2 years of being supposedly dead? In that moment, Claire no longer felt like a wife, a mother, or even a normal person. She felt as if she had fallen into a pitch-black nightmare. And the worst part was, this was no nightmare. This was a brutal reality. Claire stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes locked on the scene. The bedroom that had been her sanctuary was now the stage for a naked betrayal. No lightning struck, but her world exploded. Evelyn shifted, the silk sheet sliding down to reveal a pale, bare shoulder. There was no mistaking it. The face, the eyes, the small mole on her collarbone, it all matched the image Claire thought had been buried 2 years ago. Claire took a step back, her hand gripping the doorframe. She wanted to scream, to rush in and drag them both from the bed. But what held her in place wasn't pain. It was absolute terror. Evelyn was dead. Michael himself had told her so, his voice choked with anguish after the failed surgery. They had fought furiously because Claire had suspected a relationship between him and his patient. But Michael had denied it all, insisting Evelyn was just a special case that haunted him because he couldn't save her. He had quit surgery for a time after that, becoming a medical consultant instead. Claire had thought she'd overcome the biggest crisis in her marriage, but now, that past was replaying itself literally. Suddenly, Michael stirred. Claire flinched and quickly retreated from the room before he could open his eyes. She ran down the stairs as if fleeing a twisted world, her steps lost in the familiar house that now felt alien. The family photos on the wall seemed to mock her, the memories of them painting the room together. The stories read to Lily each night, all of it felt like it was being torn to shreds. She collapsed onto the sofa, her hand trembling as she pulled out her phone. The screen lit up, reflecting her own terrified face. Claire wanted to call someone, her best friend, her mother, the police, but she didn't know where to begin. How could she possibly say that her husband was sleeping with a dead woman? A sharp pain shot through her chest. She thought of her daughter, Lily, sleeping soundly at her grandmother's house. Claire clenched her fists. She couldn't let everything fall apart like this. She couldn't let Michael take everything, including the truth. Something else awoke inside, Claire, not tears, but a terrifying, cold clarity. She needed to know who Evelyn was. A living person, an imposter, or a ghost in human flesh. And Michael, her model husband and gentle father, what was he hiding? Claire curled up on the sofa, her eyes fixed on the dark ceiling. She didn't blink, didn't sleep. She couldn't. The image of Michael and that woman Evelyn, or whatever her name was, now replayed in her mind like a horror movie with no end. In the early morning, A light rain was still falling. Claire didn't go back to the bedroom. She just stood outside the door, listening to the sound of the shower. Michael was awake. He came downstairs just like any other day, dressed immaculately, his tie straight, briefcase in hand, without a hint of unease in his posture. He saw Claire and smiled as if nothing had happened. "You're back early. I didn't get your text." Claire didn't respond. Her eyes bored into his face, searching for a crack, a sign of guilt, but there was nothing. Just the calm, composed face of a doctor, as if he hadn't just been in bed with a dead woman. "You didn't sleep in our room?" Claire asked, her voice barely a whisper, as if testing the waters. Michael frowned for a second, then laughed. "No, I was in the study. Stayed up late, reading some files and must have dozed off." "Why do you ask?" Claire went rigid. She hadn't dreamed it. She had stood right there, had seen every detail, the gray blanket, the night light casting a glow on the woman's pale skin. That face was unmistakable. He was lying, smoothly and coldly. Claire nodded as if accepting his answer, but a different kind of fear was rising inside her. Had Michael been manipulating everything from the very beginning? She decided to go back to that room. After Michael left, Claire went upstairs and opened the bedroom door. Everything was spotless, tidy, with no sign of a third person. No strange perfume, no extra belongings. It was as if the woman had never existed. As if she had hallucinated the whole thing. Claire ripped the sheets off the bed. Nothing. She threw open the closet, looked under the bed frame. Empty. But then, from a corner of the closet, something small fell out. A single pearl earring, with a faint scratch near the clasp. Claire picked it up, her hand shaking. She remembered clearly. Evelyn always wore pearl earrings, even in the photograph Michael used to keep. The earring sat in Claire's palm like a piece of evidence. Proof of a truth someone was trying to erase. But she wouldn't let it disappear. That evening, Claire opened her laptop and logged into the old patient database Michael kept on his personal hard drive. She searched for the name Evelyn Reed, but the file didn't exist. She tried again. Same result. Claire's breathing quickened. Someone had deleted Evelyn's file from the system, and that could only have been done by someone with the highest level of access. Michael himself. Claire couldn't focus on anything for the rest of the day. She sat silently by the window, staring into the dense rain as if looking at a memory that had been twisted and misshapen. Everything around her was normal. But inside, a void was growing, swallowing everything whole. Michael came home at 7 p.m., right on time, as always. He wore the same gentle smile, placed a small box of macarons on the table, and said, "I stopped by that bakery you like. Got something for you and Lily." His voice was warm, his eyes kind. If Claire hadn't witnessed the night before, she would have believed he was the same devoted man she had lived with for 7 years. She tried to act natural. "Thank you. Lily will love them. I'll pick her up from your mom's tomorrow," Michael said, pouring a glass of water as usual. "Grandma says she misses you." Claire nodded, her eyes silently scrutinizing his every move. Everything about him was so perfect it made her skin crawl. This was the man who had expressed inconsolable grief when his patient died. She remembered that night vividly. He had sat hunched on the edge of the bed, unable to speak. She had believed she'd married a man with a conscience, with feelings, with remorse. But now, Claire began to wonder, was that real? Or was it just another performance? Later that night, while Michael was in the shower, Claire secretly opened his phone. The password was the same. He had never hidden anything from her before, or perhaps, it just hadn't been necessary yet. There were no strange names in his contacts, no suspicious messages. His social media apps were clean. Even his browser history was nearly empty. It was too clean. Claire opened the Photos app. In the recently deleted folder, there was a blurry picture of a woman from behind, her long hair cascading down her back as she stood on the balcony in the dim yellow light. Though her face was hidden, Claire recognized the posture, the hair, and the white lace nightgown. There was no mistake. Why had he taken her picture, and why had he deleted it? Just as she exited the folder, Michael stepped out of the bathroom. She quickly locked the screen and hid the phone behind her back, her heart pounding. "You've been acting a little strange lately," he said softly. "Is something wrong?" She turned away, forcing a strained smile. "I'm just a little tired." Michael put his hands on her shoulders. "If you're too stressed, let's take a few days off. Don't worry about a thing. I'll handle everything." The man beside her was still gentle, still thoughtful, still the perfect husband in everyone's eyes. And now he made her feel a deep, chilling cold. He was so good he could hide anything behind a hug, a concerned question. But Claire was no longer the wife who trusted him unconditionally. That night, after Michael was fast asleep, Claire slipped out of bed. She went straight to the study, where Michael kept all his hospital-related documents. The door was locked, but Claire had already retrieved the key from one of his secret hiding places. The room was dimly lit, shelves filled with neatly organized files. Her hand stopped on a file labeled Special Fatality Cases. She opened it. It was empty. A thin, empty folder. The name Evelyn Reed did not exist. She turned on the computer and accessed the hospital's records management system using Michael's account. She typed Evelyn's name into the search bar. No data found. She entered the patient ID number she had secretly photographed once when he'd forgotten to log out. Still nothing. A person who had died during surgery now had no existence in any system. Claire felt like she was being pushed into an invisible maze. She checked the wastebasket under the desk and found a crumpled piece of paper. She smoothed it out. It was a request for a temporary leave of absence from a Dr. Leo Vance, signed and dated exactly 1 week after Evelyn's supposed death. The name made Claire freeze. Dr. Vance, the anesthesiologist who had worked with Michael on complex surgeries. They had been close, but then suddenly, they never mentioned each other again. One person vanishes, another dies without a trace, and a third reappears looking exactly like the dead one. Her husband stood in the middle of it all, sleeping soundly every night. Claire put the paper in her pocket. She knew she had to find Dr. Vance. The next morning, Claire went to her mother's house to pick up Lily. Her mother opened the door, her eyes tinged with worry. The little one hasn't been sleeping well. She keeps calling out someone's name in the middle of the night. I think it's Evelyn. Claire froze. What did you say, Mom? Evelyn? Her mother nodded. I asked her about it last night. She said that a Miss Evelyn comes to play in her room at night. I just thought she was having strange dreams. The back of Claire's neck went numb. She forced herself to stay calm and walked into her daughter's room. Lily was sitting at her small table, drawing something. When she saw her mother, she cheered and held up her finished picture. Mommy, look, this is the pretty Miss Evelyn. On the paper was a drawing of a long-haired woman in a white dress, standing in a bedroom. The face was indistinct, with only dark, hollow eyes and a strange smile. Claire forced a smile back, but her hand clenched the paper. What did Miss Evelyn say to you, sweetie? Lily tilted her head and answered innocently. She told me not to tell Daddy anything. She said she just wanted to see Mommy again. In that moment, a chill ran down Claire's spine. Her daughter was only 6. She couldn't make up something like that, especially when the name Evelyn had never been mentioned in front of her. Claire was silent the entire drive home. When they arrived, she took Lily to her room, put on a cartoon for her, and closed the door. She went back to her own room and pulled the drawing from her pocket, looking at it again. Besides the woman standing by the bed, there was a small detail she had missed before. A tiny, white earring, simply drawn but clearly visible, lying on the floor near the woman's feet. Her heart pounded. It was the same earring she had found in the closet the night before. No one knew about that but her. So how could Lily have drawn it? Claire put the drawing in a drawer and locked it. She knew she was running out of time. If Evelyn, or the person wearing Evelyn's face, was trying to get to her daughter, this was no longer just about an affair. This was a threat, and Claire would not let anyone, living or dead, touch her child. That evening, while Michael was playing with Lily in the living room, Claire quietly went up to the attic, where the control unit for the home security system was located. Michael had installed it himself, a state-of-the-art system that recorded continuously and stored data on a separate hard drive. He had said it was to protect the family, but today, she wondered, what was he protecting? And from whom? She opened the control box. The power light was on. Claire sat down and connected her laptop directly to the storage drive. A familiar interface appeared on the screen, with a series of recordings sorted by date, time, and location. She navigated to that night, the night she came home early, the night everything began to fall apart. An error message flashed on the screen. No data found. She checked the cameras in the other rooms. The living room, the garage, the stairwell. All of them were blank for the period between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. Claire sat motionless, her breathing shallow and fast. This wasn't a coincidence. The system didn't just delete data on its own. It required a manual override from an administrator account, and the only other person with the password was Michael. She switched to the system's access log. A single line of text appeared. Administrator access at 2:47 a.m. Data has been permanently deleted. Michael had woken up, snuck up here, and erased every single trace. Claire bit her lip, not out of anger, but from a deep, creeping terror that was seeping into her very bones. He hadn't just made a mistake, he was covering it up. And he wasn't just covering up an affair, but something far darker and more dangerous. She remembered the look in his eyes when he'd asked her, "Is something wrong?" Gentle, calm, and utterly fake. She decided to back up the entire system log. Tomorrow, she would leave the house, quietly. She had to get to the hospital, to follow the trail of Dr. Vance, the man who had vanished after that fateful surgery. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She rose silently and stepped onto the balcony. The rain had stopped, and the air was damp and cold. She took a deep breath, telling herself to stay calm. But then, a flash of white in her peripheral vision made her heart nearly leap from her chest. In the corner of the yard, under the shadow of the large banyan tree, a woman was standing there. Her long hair covered her face, and her white dress clung to her body as if soaked in the night's dew. Claire froze. She rubbed her eyes and looked again. No one was there. The moment was so brief she wasn't sure if she had seen it or if it was a hallucination. But the chilling, prickling sensation on the back of her neck was real. She went back inside, moving softly so as not to wake Michael. She checked on her daughter. Lily was sleeping soundly. Claire pulled out her phone and opened the balcony's camera feed. Just as she expected, that segment of the recording was gone. Not a technical glitch, a deliberate deletion. If it wasn't Michael, then who? Someone was watching them. Someone who knew how to breach their security system. Someone with Evelyn Reed's face, or was it Evelyn herself? Claire didn't believe in ghosts, but the truth was, she was living through days where her own reason was beginning to crumble. The next morning, Claire acted as if nothing was wrong. She packed a bag and told Michael she was taking Lily to visit her grandmother in the countryside for a few days. Michael didn't suspect a thing and even reminded her to drive safely. Claire nodded, her smile strained, but her eyes were as hard as steel. She didn't go to the countryside. She drove alone towards the coast, to the small town where Evelyn had lived with her mother before moving to the city for college. She wasn't sure what she would find, but her instincts told her that Mrs. Reed, Evelyn's mother, held a piece of the truth that someone desperately wanted to keep hidden. The road leading into the small, quiet town was deserted. Claire parked in front of an old, single-story house with faded paint. She hesitated for a few seconds before knocking. A moment later, the door opened. A thin woman with graying hair stood there, her face deeply lined with age. Mrs. Reed's eyes were slightly clouded, and when she saw Claire, she didn't look surprised, just resigned, as if she had been expecting this visit. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice raspy. "I'm the wife of Dr. Michael Cole, the surgeon who operated on Evelyn," Claire answered slowly. A long silence passed. Mrs. Reed nodded slightly and stepped aside to let Claire in. The house was simple, the air thick with the smell of incense and damp wood. On the family altar was a photo of an elderly man, but there was no picture of Evelyn. "I'm sorry to come so unexpectedly," Claire began, "but I need to know. What really happened to Evelyn?" Mrs. Reed poured some water, her hands shaking slightly. After a moment, she said something that made the blood drain from Claire's face. "Evelyn was never buried." Claire was stunned. "What do you mean?" "After the hospital called, they just said she couldn't be saved. They wouldn't let me see her, and they never released the body. All I got was a death certificate and an apology," she said, her eyes turning red. "I looked for her everywhere, but no one would help me. Michael disappeared, wouldn't return my calls." Claire clenched her fists. "Do you think Evelyn could still be alive?" Mrs. Reed looked at her for a long time, then shook her head. "I don't know. But every night, I see her in my dreams. She stands by my bed and whispers, 'Mom, I'm so cold.'" The air in the room grew thick. Claire took out the photo of Evelyn from her phone, the only one she had. Mrs. Reed looked at it, tears welling in her eyes. But then, she said something strange. "That's not her. The face is the same, but the eyes are different. My daughter was a gentle soul. Her eyes were never that cold." Leaving Mrs. Reed's house, Claire was left with a tangled mess of unanswered questions. But one thing was certain. Michael had lied, and that lie had begun 2 years ago. That night, while Michael was on call at the hospital, Claire searched the attic, which he used for storing old things. The room was dusty, lit by a single dangling bulb. Around 3 in the morning, she managed to open an old box. Inside were medical textbooks and a scratched, old model phone. She took it downstairs and charged it overnight. The next morning, the screen flickered to life. Luckily, there was no password. In the messages, there was only a single conversation thread with a contact saved as E. She began to read. E. I can't stand living like a shadow anymore. I need you. Michael. I promise, I'll arrange it. Just be quiet. Just disappear from the world for a while. E. Disappear? You want me to die? Michael. No, I want you to live. But somewhere else. A place where no one knows you. Claire's hand trembled as she scrolled to the last messages. The words clawed at her mind. E. If I really die, do you promise to let me live on forever in someone else? Michael. I promise. Even if you're not in this world, you will always exist in me. I won't let anyone replace you. No one. Claire threw the phone onto the table. Evelyn hadn't just run away. Michael had put her into a plan to disappear. He had done something, or at the very least, he was an accomplice. In the phone's notes app, there was a single, chilling sentence written in all caps. I won't disappear. You will keep your promise. Claire felt her skin go cold. This was no longer about a cheating husband. This was the beginning of a plan to resurrect a dead soul. That evening, Michael called to say he'd be late due to an emergency consultation. As soon as he left the house, Claire followed him. His car wound through several streets before stopping at a high-end apartment complex. 15 minutes later, a woman stepped out of the lobby. She was tall and slender, wearing a long coat and a face mask. But as she stood under the entryway lights and the wind blew her hair aside, Claire froze. It was Evelyn. Or someone who looked exactly like her. Michael walked over and brushed the hair from the woman's face, a gesture so familiar it was painful. They stepped into the elevator, hand in hand. On the drive home, Claire could barely breathe. She remembered the last question in the text message. If I really die, do you promise to let me live on forever in someone else? Michael was keeping his promise. In the most twisted way imaginable. The next night, Claire secretly returned to the apartment complex, this time with a pair of binoculars. From a building opposite, she watched through an uncurtained window. The woman whom she would later learn was named Maya was pacing in the room. She was wearing a white lace dress, identical to one Evelyn had worn in an old photograph. On a table was a collection of enlarged portraits of Evelyn. Maya stopped in front of a mirror and played a recording on her phone. Michael's voice filled the air, softer. You're in pain, remember? Don't speak so quickly. Evelyn never raised her voice. Do it again. Maya nodded and repeated the line. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Her voice was soft, trembling, almost a perfect imitation. Claire felt her hands grip the railing so tightly they bled. This woman wasn't Evelyn. But she was learning how to become Evelyn every word, every glance, every smile. Michael wasn't just cheating on Claire. He was resurrecting a dead specter in the body of another woman. Claire remembered a room at the end of the third-floor hallway. A room she had never entered since they moved in. Michael had said it was for storing old hospital documents. The door was always locked, and she had never suspected a thing. Until now. That evening, while Michael was taking Lily to a weekend class, Claire was home alone. She found the spare key he kept hidden behind a painting in his study. The door opened. Inside was a small, windowless room. The first thing that caught her eye was a wall shelf covered in picture frames. They were all of Evelyn. In the center of the room was an old wooden desk, on which sat a bottle of perfume, a hairbrush, and lipstick, everyday items for a woman. Each item was neatly arranged with a small handwritten label, as if this were a living shrine for the dead. Claire moved closer and saw an open notebook. Michael's neat handwriting was clear. June 10th. Maya has learned Evelyn's voice, but her eyes still aren't sad enough. Needs more time. July 12th. Switched to the perfume Evelyn used to wear. Maya had a mild allergic reaction but complied. The last entry sent a chill down her spine. August 5th. Claire is getting suspicious. Must remain calm. He knew. He knew she was on his trail. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Michael wasn't just an adulterer. He was recreating a person from memory. from obsession, using a psychological manipulation so sophisticated it was terrifying. On the far wall was a large corkboard. On the left were photos of the real Evelyn. On the right were photos of Maya in various stages, from the day she met Michael, to when she began to change her appearance, her hairstyle, her weight, learning to speak like her. Each photo was annotated like a progress report. Claire left the room in a state of near emotional numbness. She locked the door, leaving everything as it was, and collapsed into a chair. She understood now. If she didn't act, sooner or later, Michael would erase her from his life, just as he had done with Evelyn. After leaving the locked room, Claire felt as if she had just woken from a distorted dream. The truth was hidden behind locks, old perfume, and the meticulous notes of a man trying to recreate a memory. Michael wasn't just obsessed. He was systematically obsessed. And if he had dared to recreate Evelyn in the flesh of another, how much of the past he had told her was actually true? Claire began to re-examine all the data she had from the surgery 2 years ago. She had believed Michael then because of his breakdown, the week he had barely spoken. But now, she realized, even that could have been an act. She went back to the electronic files on the old laptop, but this time, she didn't search for Evelyn's name. Instead, she searched by the date of the surgery, August 12, operating room number 4. A single result appeared. The 4th procedure of the day. A 25-year-old female patient. The name was blacked out. The post-op status column contained only 2 words. Did not survive. The reason? Undetermined. A death in a major hospital without a clear cause was highly unusual. Claire wrote down the case number and tried searching for it on an old backup USB drive of Michael's. And there, she found the one thing she never expected. An audio file. She put on her headphones, her hand shaking as she pressed play. The clinking of surgical tools, the beep of a heart monitor, and then Michael's voice. Prepare for anesthesia. Vitals are stable. She's still conscious. Another voice said. It's fine, Michael replied. Evelyn, take a deep breath. A few moments of silence followed. Then, suddenly, a terrified scream. No! Stop! You said it wouldn't hurt. You said it would just be like falling asleep. The female voice was unmistakable. It was Evelyn. She hadn't been unconscious. She had been aware of everything. She had been begging. Claire ripped the headphones off, her hands ice cold. This wasn't a failed surgery. This was a deliberate act with a fatal outcome. Michael had either let Evelyn die or done something far, far worse. But where was Evelyn's body? She had never thought about it as clearly as she did now. A dead person with no corpse, never seen by her family, with no funeral, coinciding with an anesthesiologist's abrupt resignation. If Evelyn never left the hospital, was it possible she had never left this house? A lump formed in Claire's throat as she remembered a strange detail. The storage shed in the backyard, the one Michael had forbidden her from ever going near. He had said it was filled with highly toxic termite chemicals. That night, after Michael went out, Claire took a flashlight and headed for the shed. The lock was old but sturdy. She would break it. She had to open that door. Because the truth Michael had been hiding for 2 years might be locked inside. A light rain began to fall as Claire made her way to the back of the garden. The shed was tucked between 2 ivy-covered walls. It took nearly 10 minutes before the lock finally gave way with a dry crack. She took a deep breath, her hand trembling as she pushed the wooden door open. A foul, musty, cloying smell immediately hit her. It wasn't the smell of chemicals, as Michael had claimed. It was a smell Claire recognized from her volunteer days at the hospital. The smell of decaying flesh, mixed with chlorine and old dust. In the beam of her flashlight, Claire saw a large, silver-gray suitcase. It was old but solid, with a combination lock. It was tucked in the far corner, deliberately hidden. She moved closer. The nearer she got, the stronger the sickening smell became. Without hesitation, she used a metal bar to pry the lock open. The lid sprang up. Inside was a layer of black plastic, wrapped tightly. She unwound it, layer by layer. Underneath was a discolored white cloth, a hospital sheet. Beneath the sheet was a neatly placed wig, along with pearl earrings, lipstick, and a handkerchief embroidered with the letter E. There was no body. But here was everything that had once made up a person. Michael wasn't just obsessed with Evelyn. He was preserving her physical memory like a twisted collector. Underneath these items was a scanned copy of a DNA analysis report. 2 names were marked. Evelyn Reed and Maya Kent. The result: 84% morphological similarity, no blood relation. She exhaled sharply. Michael had tried to find someone who looked the most like Evelyn, but it hadn't been enough. So he had supplemented the rest with her things, her memories, her voice. He had turned Maya into a version of Evelyn so perfect that even Claire, an outsider, was horrified. Claire quietly closed the suitcase, taking nothing but the analysis report and the earrings. She knew that if she didn't bring this to light now, there would be more Evelyns created in the future. And people like her, like Maya, would just be sacrifices. After breaking into the shed, Claire didn't sleep. She sat huddled in the study. Half of the picture was now clear. Michael was the manipulator, Maya was the copy, and Evelyn was the center of the obsessive vortex. But one question remained unanswered. Who was Maya in Evelyn's past? And why would she agree to play such a horrifying role? Claire decided she had to meet Maya. She couldn't approach her as Michael's wife. Instead, she chose an indirect route, posing as a casting director for a documentary film project, a pretext vague enough to not arouse suspicion. The meeting was set at a quiet cafe. Maya arrived on time, dressed simply, with light makeup. Today, she didn't look like Evelyn. Her real face was a far cry from the image Michael had so painstakingly constructed. "Are you Claire?" Maya asked, a hint of caution in her voice. Claire decided to cut to the chase. "Yes, I'm Michael's wife." Maya was silent, her hands clasped tightly together. There was no surprise, no panic, just a terrifyingly calm composure. Claire got straight to the point. "I know you're not Evelyn, but I also know you knew her, didn't you?" Maya's lips tightened, her expression wavering. After a moment, she gave a slight nod. "Evelyn and I were in the same classes in college," Maya said. "She was the star, beautiful, smart. Everyone wanted her, including Michael." Claire interjected. Maya nodded. "Back then, I was just a shadow. It was always, Evelyn is so brilliant, Evelyn is so beautiful. I was jealous, envious. But I never thought I would." She trailed off. Claire stared into the other woman's eyes. "Would what?" Maya looked down, her voice a bare whisper. "Evelyn once caught me secretly recording her, taking pictures of her. I wanted to be like her, to imitate her, to become more perfect. And then Evelyn disappeared," Claire said. Maya was silent. "Did you know Michael killed her?" Maya's head snapped up, her eyes showing raw terror for the first time. I didn't know that. When he contacted me, I thought I had a chance. I thought this was my reward for waiting. But then," she choked out, "he made me cut my hair, get plastic surgery, learn how to smile, even read Evelyn's diaries to get into character. I wasn't allowed to be myself anymore. I became a puppet." Claire clenched her fists. "Then why didn't you run?" Maya let out a bitter laugh. "Because I have nothing left. I destroyed myself the very first day I started imitating Evelyn." Michael just completed the distortion that was already there. Between the two women, the wife and the replacement, a long, heavy silence stretched, weightier than any accusation. Claire understood. Maya wasn't a complete victim. She had admired, envied, and wanted to become Evelyn with an obsessive desire. But it was Michael who had twisted that desire into a sick game of control. And now, both of them, Claire and Maya, were victims of the same man. That evening, Claire went home earlier than usual. Michael wasn't back yet. The house was quiet as always, neat, clean, and far too perfect. Claire sat in the living room, the locked suitcase placed squarely on the coffee table, a silent piece of evidence waiting for judgment. The click of the lock sounded at 8:12 p.m. Michael stepped inside, his shirt slightly wrinkled, his tie loosened. The moment he saw Claire, he froze. The way she sat there back straight, eyes fixed on him, no greeting, no question made the air in the house turn to ice. "Were you waiting for me?" Michael asked, trying to keep his voice light. "Yes," Claire replied, her hand patting the lid of the suitcase. "I found this in the garden, along with your notebook. And I found Maya." Michael was silent. No surprise, no denial, just a terrifyingly calm composure. "Were you expecting me to find it?" Claire pressed. "No," Michael answered. "But I knew. Sooner or later. You would. Then why didn't you stop me? Or were you curious to see how much I could take?" Michael walked slowly into the room and sat in the chair opposite her, his gaze meeting hers without flinching. "I don't know where to begin. Start with this. Did Evelyn really die in that surgery? Silence. A single blink, then Michael answered. She didn't make it, but it wasn't a medical error. It was because she wanted to leave this world. That's a pathetic excuse. Evelyn had borderline personality disorder. She told me many times that there was no longer a place for her in this world. I was only keeping my final promise to her. She didn't want to be buried. She didn't want her parents to know. Claire let out a short, bitter laugh. And you keep that promise by turning another person into her clone. Michael's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping for the first time. You don't understand, Claire. Some people, when they die, leave a void that can never be filled. I didn't create Maya to replace Evelyn. I was preserving a memory. By brainwashing a young woman and destroying your own marriage? Michael stood up and stepped closer, his gaze as sharp as a knife. I was never in love with Maya. I love Evelyn. And you've known from the very beginning, Claire, that I never truly loved you. The words hit her like a physical blow. Claire didn't cry. She just stared into the eyes of the man who had once been her entire world. No, Michael, I knew you might not love me. But I didn't know you were this dangerous. She pulled the copy of the DNA report from her pocket, along with his notebook and the USB drive containing the recording of the surgery. She placed them on the table, one by one. I won't be silent. You should prepare yourself. Michael laughed softly, a twisted, uncontrolled smile. So, you're choosing to fight instead of run. Claire stood up, leaning in close to his face. I'm choosing to live. And to protect my daughter from a man who would kill just to keep a promise to a ghost. After the fiery confrontation with Michael, Claire knew she couldn't wait another second. Early the next morning, while he was still asleep, she quietly left the house, taking the USB drive, the lab report, the photos, and the notebook filled with his obsessive entries. She gave everything to David, a private investigator and a seasoned former homicide detective. David didn't ask many questions, just listened to Claire's story and nodded. I'll look into Dr. Leo Vance, the one who disappeared from the medical field. I have a source that says he moved to a remote part of the Appalachian Mountains to live as a recluse. Claire clenched her fists. I need to see him. 2 days later, David found the coordinates of a small, isolated house in a sparsely wooded area. Claire went with him, her stomach churning with unanswered questions. The car stopped in front of a wooden cabin tucked under the trees, the scene so remote it was breathtakingly desolate. A man in his 50s answered the door. His eyes were sunken, his hair prematurely gray, and his expression was haunted, as if he hadn't slept peacefully in a decade. It was Dr. Vance. He wasn't surprised to see Claire, nor did he deny anything when she mentioned Evelyn's name. You're here because of Michael, he said, his voice raspy. And because of Evelyn, Claire replied. I need to know the truth. A short while later, in the damp kitchen, Dr. Vance began his story. That surgery should never have happened. Evelyn had a history of a severe allergy to a specific anesthetic. It was noted clearly in her secondary chart. But Michael hid that chart. He said Evelyn trusted him completely. I had my doubts, he continued. But Michael was so confident, his reasoning so airtight. I let my guard down. When Evelyn went into anaphylactic shock, I knew something was terribly wrong. Michael told me to step out for a few minutes to let him handle it. And I did. I left the room. A chilling silence hung in the air. I didn't see anything. But when I came back, Evelyn was covered with a white sheet, her heart had stopped, and no resuscitation order was given. He killed her, or he let her die. Claire choked out. Doctor, Vance said softly. I didn't dare to ask. I resigned the next day and moved here to run away from my own guilt. Just then, David's phone rang. He stared at the screen, then turned to Claire. Claire, my team just found a cold case report from park rangers 2 years ago. They discovered an unidentified female body in a ravine in this area. No one ever claimed her. The victim was wearing a hospital gown. Claire shot to her feet, her heart plummeting. That afternoon, she drove back to the coastal town where Evelyn's mother lived. In her hand was the hair sample from the wig in the locked suitcase. The DNA results came back 48 hours later, a 99.97% match. The unidentified body was Evelyn Reed. Claire submitted the entire file to the Criminal Investigation Department. She knew it would take more than emotion to open a case. But now, they had a body, and that body didn't just appear in the woods by itself, didn't dress itself in a hospital gown. and certainly didn't erase itself from the medical records. Michael was summoned for questioning 3 days later. He wasn't surprised. He wore an immaculate suit, his demeanor calm. "I didn't kill anyone," he told the investigators. But this time, his words held no power. Michael was taken into custody for criminal investigation on charges of concealing a body, desecration of a corpse, and falsifying medical records. The first hearing opened nearly 3 weeks later. Among the witnesses called, Maya was the most unexpected. The girl who had once worn Evelyn's face, who had walked in the shadow of the dead, now sat on the witness stand, perfectly composed. The unhinged look was gone, the half-dazed expression replaced by clarity. Maya was awake, and this time, she was herself. "I don't believe Evelyn was an innocent person," Maya began, her voice calm but clear. She had a powerful charisma, but she was also brilliant at manipulating people's emotions. "We were involved before Michael married Claire." A low murmur went through the courtroom. "Evelyn once told me, 'I'm going to get him back. Claire is just a safe replacement.' I didn't believe her. Not until Evelyn herself sent me an audio recording." Maya took a USB drive from her pocket and handed it to the court. On the recording, Evelyn's voice was heard, soft but full of challenge. "Michael loves me. Claire just showed up at the right moment, when I let him go. But now I'm back. If Michael has any sense left, he'll know who he can't forget." Claire heard the recording from the witness waiting room. She sat motionless. Even though she no longer loved Michael, even though she had moved past the pain, the words still stung. Evelyn was not entirely a victim. She had entered Claire's marriage not by chance, but with clear and deliberate intent. Maya continued, "I'm not saying Evelyn deserved to die, but she was not innocent. And Michael, he wasn't just haunted by the past. He was being controlled by a ghost he could never truly possess." Her statement cast a pall over the courtroom. The line between guilt and weakness, between victim and perpetrator, had become blurred. The court recessed to deliberate. In the hallway, Claire and Maya saw each other again. They were no longer two women on opposing sides. Maya spoke softly. "You were right to see it through to the end. I was just stuck in the middle." Claire gave a slight nod. "No one can stay in the middle forever. You're either yourself, or you become a shadow." Maya walked away, and this time, it was for good. No more Evelyn, no more role-playing. As for Claire, she knew that even though the verdict hadn't been read, justice had begun to speak. The city courthouse delivered its sentence on a rare, sunny morning. Claire sat in the back row. Michael was sentenced to 15 years in prison for manslaughter, concealment of a body, destruction of evidence, and falsifying medical records. It was a sentence long enough to ensure he was no longer a free man, and no longer had the power to stage his sick resurrections in the name of love. As he was being escorted out, Michael turned his head, searching for Claire, but she didn't look at him. The man who had been her husband, the father of her child, was now just a faded specter of obsession and mistakes. 2 weeks later, Claire signed over the deed to the old house, sold everything inside, and closed the door on the place where all her suffering had begun. She took Lily and moved to Aspen, a peaceful mountain town where no one knew their past. She rented a small house with a garden and started a small, artisanal bakery from her home. Every morning, Claire would wake up with her daughter, bake bread, water the flowers, and then walk Lily to school. These small, simple acts, which she had once found monotonous, now felt like the privilege of a survivor. One afternoon, Lily drew a picture for her mother of the two of them standing in the sunday. Claire asked, "Why didn't you draw Daddy?" Lily answered softly, "Because Daddy is in the sad story. Now it's only happy stories." The words made Claire laugh. A gentle and genuine laugh. 3 years later, the small light in Claire's bakery on a quiet aspen slope was still on every morning. The hand-carved wooden sign was weathered, but the smell of fresh bread never faded. Her life was now contained in simple things, but it was full and safe. One October afternoon, as Claire was cleaning the counter, a man walked in. He wore a simple button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and his hair was flecked with gray. Claire looked up and met a pair of familiar eyes. It was Dr. Vance. "Hello, Claire," he said, his voice low but warm. "I was passing through on a business trip and heard you had a bakery, so I stopped by." Claire invited him to sit, poured him some tea, and sat across from him. There were no more barriers, no more torment. "Are you doing okay?" he asked. Claire nodded. "I am. and I'm grateful to have survived. He looked around the small shop, his eyes landing on a photograph on the wall. It was of Claire and Lily, standing in a field of wildflowers against the sun. A picture so peaceful it seemed no storm had ever touched them. I'm doing better, too, he said. They sat in silence for a moment, like two survivors from the same shipwreck. No story needed to be retold. Just knowing the other was still here was enough. Before he left, Dr. Vance turned back and asked, "If one day, someone wanted to start a new chapter with you, would you be ready?" Claire smiled softly, neither nodding nor shaking her head. She said, "I'm not afraid of love, I just don't want it from someone who never learned how to love correctly." That evening, Claire took Lily for a walk. A gentle mountain breeze blew, carrying the scent of pine and a hint of cold. She held her daughter's hand, her eyes on the setting Sunday. There was no past weighing her down, no ghosts haunting her, just two warm hands and a new road ahead. Claire had walked through the deepest parts of her pain, not for revenge, but to find herself again. She had faced the truth, chosen to protect her daughter, and finally, chosen to let go of the past to live. Because sometimes, strength isn't about holding a marriage together, but about keeping yourself whole after it falls apart. And for Claire, a new door had truly opened, in a place she had only reached because she dared to leave the darkness that had once held her captive. Thank you all for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so please leave a comment below. Your support means the world to us.